Well, good evening, everybody. It's great to see you. I'm sure that those of you on TV can see me very well. Not so sure those in the auditorium can see me. Not the biggest guy in the world. I'm very glad this isn't a high pulpit. I was in England a while ago in an Anglican church, and they had a pulpit. You almost felt you needed crampons to get into the thing. It was quite high. You went round and round and round this circular staircase. And I got to the top just as they were singing the final verse of the hymn just before I preached. Sat down, prayed, stood up, and nobody could see me. All they could see actually was the top of my hair, which was moving along the pulpit. And I'm sure lots of them thought they had a cremated ferret that was walking about. So I trust you can see me okay. As you'll find out if you come night by night, I tend to walk around a lot. And there are a number of reasons for that. I was in Australia a little while ago, and there was a gentleman who was videoing the meetings. And I was just chatting with people as we began, and this gentleman in the central aisle was kind of waving to me. And I'm thinking, what is up with this guy? So I stopped and said, excuse me, what's the problem? And he said in a voice everybody could hear, he said, you are. He said, you are a cameraman's nightmare. He said, you're like a one-man tennis match. 1 minute you're here, the next minute you're here. So I hope you don't get seasick at home watching. I usually begin with a joke. I hope that's okay, just to relax me. I think it's okay to laugh. I shared this with some friends this afternoon. They said it was okay. It's the story of a businessman on a Saturday morning, and he's ringing somebody who works for him. And instead of his employee picking the phone up, it was the little boy. And the little boy says in a whisper, hello. And the boss says, is your dad there? And the answer is, yes. He said, well, could I talk to him, please? No. He says, why not? He says, he's with my mum. He says, where's your mum? And the little boy says, with the fireman. And he's getting the drift of this. He says, where's the fireman? And the little boy says, with the policeman. Okay, he says, where's the policeman? He's with the man in the helicopter. So now he's totally bewildered. He says, listen, your mum's there, your dad's there, a policeman's there, a fireman's there, the man in the helicopter's there, what are they all doing? And there's a long pause, and then the little voice says, looking for me. Which has absolutely nothing to do with anything. Isn't that great? On British TV, I don't know if you have something similar here, we have a thing called Britain's Got Talent. And it's very similar to the X Factor or American Pop Idol. And people who are talented in a certain area come forward and they have an audition. And there are normally 3 judges sitting there. One of them is Simon Cowell. Some of you would know him. And last June, 2007, was one of the most moving auditions I've ever seen in my life. Because the gentleman who stepped forward was a man called Paul Potts. And by his own admission, he said, I'm not the most handsome person in the world. He said, I was bullied a lot at school. He said, my dad is a bus driver. My mum works in a supermarket checkout. He said, and I'd just like to sing for you. And Simon Cowell is sitting there looking fed up, and everybody else on the panel is gazing off into the middle distance. And this gentleman stood. He was a car phone warehouse salesman. He stood and he sang Nessun Dorma as I have never heard it sung before in my life. And I watched Simon Cowell, whose head came up and his jaw sagged open, and he looked at this man. The lady on the panel sitting next to him started to cry. And when this man had finished singing, the 2,000-strong audience leapt to their feet and gave him a standing ovation. And I got a lump in my throat. I'm going tearful. I'm thinking, what is this about? And as I thought about that, I realized why I was so moved. And I was moved because all of us are delighted when somebody who most people write off actually achieves something. And it seems to me that one of the great principles of the Bible that we so often forget, especially in church, is that God made you to achieve something. God designed you and me personally to make a significant contribution to the world. God wants us all to live so as to be missed and to walk so as to leave footprints. Now, the truth is that many people, many Christian people, do not experience that and in their deepest heart don't believe that. There was an American philosopher, 19th century, called Thoreau, and he said this: the mass of men and women live lives of quiet desperation and go to the grave, listen to this, with the song still in them. And I wonder how many of us actually have discovered the reason God put us on this planet. As Duncan mentioned in his introduction, I'm the principal of a Bible school in the northwest of England. And we get about 170 students from all around the planet every year. And they turn up and I look at them and my heart goes out to them. And I would imagine probably a dozen times in the 6 months they're with us, I say to them how I view them. And I say, guys, this is how I see you. You are potentially key players in the 21st century church. You are people who, if you discover God's call on your life and how God wants to use you, you will make an impact on this planet. And often as I'm talking to them, it's almost as though I'm looking out and they're all sitting there and they're all taking notes and paying attention. And it's almost as though the picture goes wobbly and then it sharpens and I see them 15, 20, 25 years down the road. And I'm now not looking at 18 and 19-year-old young people. I'm looking at people who are doctors and people who are great mums and dads and people who are pastors and nurses and people who've discovered God's call on their life. However, I smuggled a word in. I said, I view you as potentially key players. One of the things that I love about Bible school is when everybody arrives, and they arrive end of September, beginning of October, they all on the first Sunday evening have to introduce themselves. And they have to say 4 things about themselves. Number 1, their name. Number 2, where they're from. Number 3, what they were doing before they came. And number 4, if they know, what they hope to do when they leave. And it's really funny listening to them introduce themselves. I mean, some of them should be certified. Some of them should be on medication when they stand up. We had one guy who introduced himself. He says, my name's Tom. Before I came here, I was a hired killer, and then he sat down. What? You could feel the atmosphere change. And I thought, we can't just leave that hanging there. So I said, Tom, just please tell us a bit more about yourself. And he stands up and says, well, before I came here, I used to fly B-52 bombers for the American Air Force. And there's this collective sigh of relief. Because half of our guys thought they were going to be sharing a room with some member of the mafia or something. Now, most of the students, when they introduce themselves, and I understand this, try to present a great image. So some gal stands up, and you get the feeling that she's definitely a close relative of Mother Teresa. Just the stuff she shares, you kind of pick it up. Some guy stands up, he's right up there with the angel Gabriel, And then I get to know them. Then the masks come off. Then they start coming along to my office and knocking on the door. And I realize, like the rest of us, that they have massive things that they are struggling with. And that's why I use the word potentially. How do I view you? How does God view you? As those who are potentially key players in the 21st century church. But God's got lots of work to do in all of our lives.